Hello, everyone. As you join us, we'll give everybody a little bit of time to get set up. Welcome to CoMotion Labs Fundamentals for Startups. While we wait for everyone to log in and get started on this meeting, I will make a few announcements. Next week, Christina Hiuka will present Innovativeness, Flourishing or Withering, How to Keep the Heart of Innovation Beating Strong. Christina is an executive leadership coach, a culture change agent, and a leadership development professional with a consistently powerful impact on organizational, team, and individual performance. She has worked with companies and organizations across sectors and around the world, and with C-level executives, senior leadership teams, high potential leaders, and new managers, offering one-on-one team coaching, training design and delivery, meeting, process facilitation, and group presentations. So hopefully you can join us next week. All of our Fundamentals for Startups presentations are recorded and archived on our CoMotion website under labs/training videos. We have covered a variety of topics over the past several years. So if you do find yourself with some free time these days, please check us out on our past talks. For our full schedule and to register for our future fundamentals, please visit comotion.uw.edu/events. Today, Lakita Williams is here to discuss building your culture as you scale your business. Lakita is the founder of Co-Create Work, a consultancy that helps small businesses, startups, and emerging companies build transformational culture through executive coaching, accelerated leadership development, and culture strategy. Co-Create Work is on a mission to help purpose-driven leaders build businesses of the future. Lakita will take all of her questions via chat, so if you have any questions anytime throughout the presentation, you can post them to the chat, and I and Lakita will keep an eye on that. And now I will turn the event over to Lakita. Welcome.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, Caroline. I'm so happy to be here and excited to talk with you all, share the presentation, and of course, answer questions. And the questions that you have now might be different than the questions you had 3 months ago, and we are definitely ready to talk through and tackle those as well. And let me just share my screen here and we'll get started. All right, perfect. Welcome, welcome. So I want to, let me just get organized here. Perfect. So I'm excited and honored to be here. And what I want to talk to you today about is the 5 components of building your culture as you scale. As Caroline mentioned, we're going to save quite a bit of time for Q&A. Let's also try to make this hour interactive as well. So if questions come up kind of as I'm going along, feel free to drop those in the chat. We may answer them as we go, but we'll definitely also be sure to answer them at the end. I'll typically have a couple questions for you, so you can jump in with those answers on the chat as well. As Caroline mentioned, I'm the founder of Co-Create Work, and we help businesses, particularly small and emerging businesses, build confidence in their ability to lead, design the type of culture they want, and create systems and strategies to scale that culture up. I was drawn to this mission, started really early in 2010. I was personally in the growth phase of my corporate role, leading a team of over 200 people, and then had a huge medical challenge or personal challenge that I had to deal with. And it got me to thinking about how do we build cultures more effectively that support people in organizations. And I continued that work, becoming a master's level social worker and working in growing organizations, also working with Amazon.com on their organizational design. So I'm happy and excited anytime that we get the opportunity to talk about building healthy, inclusive, and really functional, high achieving cultures as well. Perfect. So when we talk about the components of building your culture to scale, I think about 5 things. And these are 5 key components that you can kind of think of as a framework. And when we talk about building culture to scale, think about having things like better productivity, increased innovation, and healthier workplaces. So I'm really going to talk to you. These things can be repeated across businesses, regardless of if you have a retail business, if you have a business that is primarily done online, if folks work remotely, which almost all of us are doing right now, or if we work in an office together. So these things are going to apply to that. And some may feel more relevant than others. So what I would encourage you to do is, if you have a question about how something like, let's say, working agreements would transfer to business, I think we kind of have a smaller group here. So I'm available to answer questions about that as well. So let's start with our very first component. And that's going to be shared purpose, the reason why something or someone exists. And you have probably heard a couple of different things, right? Purpose is important and vital for the business is one thing that you may have heard, or you may have heard that purpose is meaningless, or it's just is central to building and scaling a great team or culture. And I've seen that done again and again. However, if it's not done correctly, it can have no impact. It can also have a negative impact on your culture. And typically that'll happen because people see it as just fluff. So something that is not really taken seriously. And so when you start to outline the purpose for your business, you really need to make sure that you are living that purpose as an organization and that you talk about it. So as we go through each of the components, we'll talk about the definition, what does it mean in this context, and we'll also talk about some specific strategies or things to consider to help you implement that purpose. So if a company is not purpose-driven, what can happen is it can lead to burnout. It can lead to boredom. Both of those are a tough place to innovate from. And people need individual sense of purpose as well. According to the Global Purpose Index, purpose-driven team members are going to be more resilient. They're going to be more flexible. And therefore, purpose-driven companies have higher profitability, greater innovation, and greater satisfaction. So some kind of where you can start from is a measurement system, right? So if you hear questions like, what are we doing as a team? Where are we going? Why does this work even matter? Or why are we focused on this particular area? That may be a critical look question, but generally people feel like there's not a sense of direction. They don't know the impact that they're making or that the business is making. That might be a sense that people aren't connected to purpose or they don't feel like they're on a purpose-driven team. Now, purpose-driven teams tend to ask questions or make statements like, I'm here because our work changes lives. We help people change their lifestyle. And that particular business was a food retail store. So instead of we're here to get people from A to B or get people resources, right? We're here to support people and help people change their lifestyle. With everything that's happening with COVID-19, I think people are starting to view their jobs. We outside may view jobs as essential, right? Our grocery stores are essential, but have those stores made their employees feel like they have purpose in the work that they do. And it's important that we do both. So outside, your clients or customers may say, yes, your business is important and central to me, but do your employees feel that? Other statements they might make, give an example from hospitality. We help people spend time with their family and we center diversity, which no one else is doing in this space. So that was a direct comment from employees who worked in the hospitality industry. How can we activate our purpose and lead our company more effectively is the steps that I'm going to walk through with you about purpose. Whenever I kind of think about purpose, I think about a study that was published by HBR, and you may have seen this headline, which is 9 out of 10 people are willing to earn less money to do more meaningful work. And this is true both in my experience and what they highlighted in the article. Previously to COVID-19, and I think honestly that it will continue, people are leaving traditional and corporate careers in search of meaning. So if I had to ask you all, how much less do you think people are willing to earn from a percentage? And just drop that in the chat for me. I'll give you a second here. Percentage-wise, 25%, 50%, 10%. Any others? All right, a lot of 25, a lot of 25, 10%. All right, we're right here. People are willing to earn 23% less, 23% less of their future income in order to have jobs that are meaningful. And to be honest, I think that as we were already all talking about and considering the future of work, this is only going to be accelerated. I think, yes, people will continue to or think about with what is happening with COVID-19, do I have stability, security in an organization, regardless of the size of the business? But moments like these are typically reflective for people, and they're going to want to have more connection to purpose and feeling like that they are making an impact. Now, this doesn't mean that the impact only has to be if your business is a nonprofit. Regardless of what your business does, and if it's promoting for the well-being of others, you can frame up purpose for your team and help them identify the purpose in the work that you do. So let's talk about activating shared purpose. Questions you want to ask yourself. So let's just say you're a team of one for now, or a team of two. It's okay to start right here. So why does your business or team exist? Answer that question for yourself. You also want to answer, what is the vision for the future? And then who does your business or team impact? And then think about to yourself, how can you highlight where individual team members and their role have impact? So typically we may say, as an organization, and I see this happen a lot with maybe nonprofit organizations, our mission is big, like our purpose is very clear, and we are doing something that impacts people and changes lives. But an individual on that team, let's say the person does project management or program management work, let's say they do technical work, they might not see their connection to that bigger purpose, and so therefore they won't have that same feeling of impact that they would if they understood their connection. So that's going to be important. How do you do all of this? Well, you start answering the first questions and you write that out and you make sure you share it, but also what stories support your purpose. So I think we hear a lot about storytelling and speaking right to our purpose and our mission. What stories can you tell that highlight the individual impacts that people are having within the team on your customers and clients, and also what impact are you having as a business? Now, purpose alone, of course, does not create an effective culture. And typically when people say, well, purpose doesn't work, right? It was maybe we are a purpose-driven business and that's the only thing that we are doing. The other components really need to go along with that. So if you stop at purpose, then it may fail, right, of course, to have the impact that you want it to have. So let's talk about the next component, which I think is critical, and that is working agreements. Typically, I think as I'm explaining this one, people you might think about values. I use the terms either working agreements or principles because they tend to show up more active for people versus what our values are. And I'll talk about some specific examples of that. So our working agreements answer the question, how do we work together? And if you look at the definition here, ways of working that we use in our partnership as an organization, our working agreements may highlight internal work or external work or partnership. My recommendation is usually partnership across the two, and I'll share a little bit more about that. And these principles are going to make it implicit and clear to everyone so that we can have alignment and we can have some accountability as we partner together as well. So next question for the chat, just a yes or no. How many of you have what you would consider either values, principles, or agreements? And I'll give you a chance to get in there. Yes, good. I see some yeses there. And it's okay for others. Anyone feel like they don't have them yet or it feels stuck? Oh, quite a few yeses. Not yet, still putting them together. Thanks. Okay, wonderful. And hopefully what we talk about today will help with that as well. So again, none of these things can be done in isolation. So it takes, if you think about putting purpose in place or putting working agreements in place, you have to do continued actions to allow that to be able to move forward. So with working agreements, we're going to have alignment and agreement on what they mean as well. And again, this comes back to the storytelling piece. So let me walk you through some different examples of some that I think work and some that don't work. All right, so here's an example that I pulled from Coca-Cola. Core value is integrity, be real. So here what I would say is if I come into the organization, I'm new to the company, I'm on board, and I have a very particular thing that I think integrity means or what it means to be real. So there is no further explanation, or maybe you would do that during onboarding, but how do people get in alignment about what this value means? So let me give another example from my previous company, which is Amazon. And one of their values is are right a lot. So again, here it has an explanation of that particular value. And I will say from experience, they actually had to go back and edit this one. So the values are right a lot, leaders are right a lot, and they have strong judgment and good instincts. It used to stop right there. So with that principle, it was used typically sometimes for bad behavior, right? So I'm going to be right, I'm not going to listen, which highlights two things. When you create value, purpose for your company, nothing is ever done in isolation and never looked at again. So I'm going to talk about that because that's one of the components. You want to go back and review and see if things still make sense. So they actually came in and added the final sentence, which is they seek diverse perspectives and work to disconfirm their beliefs. Being internal to Amazon, I know that they do a lot of work around these, they call them leadership principles, to make sure that people understand. In some cases, what I've heard people describe these like for Amazon is indoctrination in a sense. And so when you are building working agreements or principles, it's not about indoctrinating people who come and work there. What it is about is clarity and alignment and saying this is what we stand for. So let's take a look at one that I think gets us a little bit closer. So this one, it was done with a small business here, local to Seattle. And the principle here is learn and adapt. And then they talk a little bit about some of the activities. So we seek to learn by doing and look for ways to improve. That's sort of the definition, right? We have the humility to recognize we have more to learn, integrity to have difficult conversations, and conviction that better is possible. We move forward when decisions need to be made. So they're already working through what this description means and seeking to get alignment. And that's what you want to do. Now, you don't want to have 20 working agreements or principles that are each a paragraph long. Instead, you can come up with something that's a bit shorter. But again, how do you integrate those into your daily work, how you talk about it within the organization? So let's look at some of the ways that you can activate working agreements. So take time with your team. So where do you start? Just to give an example, I know a couple people are still building. Take time with your team and capture central ways that you want to work together and how you want to work with your customers. So if you're starting from a blank slate, kind of slate. You can get together a smaller representative group around the company, or you can all get together. For Shift Results, as an example, they're a team of 8, and so we all work together to build out, went through an activity to build out these working agreements. So you can start right there with the team that you have. What are important ways of working that we would like to adopt? Now, this is where we go from the definition of values, which typically are external. So we value integrity as a company, and we talk about switching that to working agreements or principles. How do we partner together internally? So think about that as you build out those working agreements or principles. We can talk about how we partner together or work together internally as well, and that can be a part of it. Then you want to make sure that you define those. So avoid using just one word like, integrity, or short phrases. Don't be evil. I'm not trying to pick on any or on Google there, but make sure that it's really clear what it means so we can get in alignment. Then, are the agreements active? I think I integrity a little bit because it's one of the ones that I hear the most, and people within the organization have no idea what we mean when we talk about integrity. And then, are we aligned? So do we think about them in the same way, and do we approach them in the same way? So that is where you want to start with working agreements. So our next component is going to be systems. So implementing systems. Creating systems and processes that are designed to support consistency, alignment, and inclusion. Now, when people hear or see systems, they get a little nervous. You may hear feedback like innovation hates systems, but does it really hate systems, right? If we can harness the power of shared understanding and execution together, then we're going to enable more innovation and clarity. Systems, you're right, are not going to be effective if we get stuck or if we don't check in on how they're working. So we have to make sure that we do that in order to take advantage of the benefits. So one example of this might be inclusive decision making. If we decide, hey, which decisions do we make at each level of the organization, and then what's the system we use to make those decisions, then you're going to move a lot faster than an individual making a decision kind of in a siloed way, and then, it goes across the organization, or you don't have full buy-in to keep that going. So systems are really important. And let me just give some other highlight examples of the systems that you can use. So I mentioned decision making. A system could be meeting etiquette and structure. I even consider hiring as part of like a system or process that you have in the organization. Role clarity is one of the biggest opportunities that I see, and that is for businesses of all sizes. So I'll say that again, because I think that typically when we're small, we say we don't need any role clarity in between like how we're working together. And even if you are a small founding team and you wear a lot of different hats in the organization, totally okay. But we need clarity about each of the roles that each person is holding. What exactly do each of those roles mean? And then where is decision-making authority within those roles? So typically when I come into an organization or partner and there's a lot of friction, it really starts with role clarity. So you want to make sure that you address that. And it's a couple of different methods that you can use for creating systems. Typically, you just want to say, maybe you say, like, where are we starting off with friction, or what are the basic systems that we need? Most organizations, and you all can let me know in the chat, maybe don't have a project management team or a program management team, but that goes across different individuals in the organization. So you really want to say, when we talk about project management as a company, what does that mean, and what does that role entail, and what does each person have authority for? And let's talk about a little bit more about how you activate systems. I think I mentioned what are some areas where people are getting stuck? And what are systems that you have in place that maybe need to be updated? Particularly, I see this with something like bringing on new people. You're accelerating hiring really quickly, and you typically did it one way, and now you need to go back and kind of outline a system. I will just give you a heads up here. Even if you are hiring 1 to 2 people, please put a hiring system in place. It's going to help you to make sure that you're being first, more diverse and inclusive, but also that you're getting the right people in the role. I know that typically we're moving fast, or we're building something and we just are like, well, I know someone and let me bring them in. This is one of the biggest things that we have to come into organizations and partner on, right? That we have the wrong person either in the wrong role, or maybe the wrong person that's not the right fit for the organization. So think about that. Look at if there's any informal systems or processes that are currently in place. And then you want to work on making those clear to everyone, or either getting rid of that. So an example might be if your business has 8 or 9 people, the informal system might be everyone comes to you as the founder or the CEO for decision making. And then, is that the system that you want to continue? And if not, you want to outline specifically what that should mean. Also look for, is there an area of the business that feels isolated or siloed? In that case, you want to implement or activate a system that can help to spread information across the organization. And if you're just starting with this, write a list of areas where systems or processes would be beneficial. I want to just encourage you to remember that design requires innovation. So culture can be designed just like potentially like the tool you use in the business, or the product you sell, or the work you do with clients. So culture can be designed as well, and that means it requires iteration as well. So it's not a one and done. We have a hiring process, we're done with it. And we'll come back and talk about that a little bit. So you want to make sure that you're keeping that in mind. So let's move on to designing for autonomy. And designing for ownership. I lost myself a little bit there. So building a culture of flexibility, autonomy, and accountability. So I know and realize, and I think we talk about this a lot, that autonomy and flexibility does vary by industry, but we can all do better with this. One thing that I want you to know, and I think that research just proves, is that when people have ownership of their work and their decisions, they feel more connected, they perform better, and typically they feel a higher sense of purpose. So this is actually the way that we'll be working in the future, and I think a lot of us are learning this at an accelerated rate right now, particularly if people are moving from in-office to remote work with COVID-19, or instead of 10 people being in an office or 10 people being in a retail store, we have 5. We need to allow and make sure that we build in for more autonomy. It is also going to give you lift, or if you're on here and you're a manager, if you're a founder or any other leader, to ensure that people have autonomy and flexibility in their work. This also is going to allow people to have more creativity. I think as entrepreneurs, we know how important autonomy is more than anyone. So let's bring that into our teams. One piece of feedback that I get here quite a bit is that I'm giving people autonomy and they're not taking it, or they're still coming to me asking me questions, or don't want to make the decision. You are going to have to typically coach people around this, because most organizations have done a lot of work to take autonomy and flexibility out of the culture. So you are going to have to empower people, encourage them to make decisions, and then create a safe space as well, where if someone makes a poor decision or a decision that fails, that they feel like that they can talk to you, they can learn from that, and that they can go on and feel comfortable to make more decisions in the future. one thing just another note for founders is that sometimes we over-index here. And so we're building autonomy. I'm going to be completely hands-off. That does not work either, because it creates kind of this dilemma where I'm taking autonomy or I'm making decisions, and then I'm not sure of what is the next step, or two people are working on something totally different. So you still have to remain engaged here. And when I have a couple links that I'll give here in the end, but a case study found that when employees in manufacturing shared and implemented their creative solutions, productivity and profit increased. So a lot of what I'm giving you here will, yes, increase productivity, profitability, but it's not, I'm not saying that just for those reasons. It's ultimately because we want to build healthier, happier workplaces. I think a lot of you already think that way, which is why you're here right now. So keep that in mind. And I see I have a chat here. Perfect. I'm interested in how I see Kiara asked a question or made a statement. I'm interested in how these aspects can and should be integrated into firms that for the foreseeable future will only be run by the owner with no other employee or team members. This is great. And I look forward to discussing that right after we finish these components, because I think there is a piece here about partnership even if you have something like independent contractors, and we will certainly get to that. Thank you for that. All right, so let's talk about how we activate ownership. One is to build a learning culture. So what a learning culture means is that it's okay for me to maybe try something different, to learn, to take some risk. That is going to be very important. And then all the things that I just spoke about, where can we have more authority within the role, more flexibility, and think about what does flexibility mean in our culture. So you can think about that also from like how our workday is. For some people, it feels important as the leader or the founder that people work 9 to 5. I'm going to say that I would encourage you to think beyond that if you are able to. Especially if the work is not tied to a particular space that people need to be for a certain number of hours. How can we release this need that people need to be all online at the same time if we can? And I'll take questions about how we can do that as we get to the end as well. So think about how we build more flexibility, how we use coaching. So coaching is less of I'm going to give you feedback. I think that's the way the term has typically been used. And instead, when you use coaching style, you ask questions and see what your team member or your partner within the organization, like their ideas. It encourages self-discovery versus you just providing answers. So that's going to activate ownership within people as well. And I think this ties back to my point about people taking risk, right? They need to feel that they can take risk. So it may be quicker for you to provide an answer, depending on the work, but you want to encourage and hear ideas. And that idea, typically, if they're closer to the work, it's going to be better than the solution that you would have came up with. So be sure to consider that. The last bullet I have here is to focus on trust and transparency. When we're not activating ownership across the team, typically it's because there is some concern about whether I can trust the people. So that is usually an individual journey about like, what do I believe to be true? Do I think that people care about my business or care about the organization as much as I care? And what I will say is the vast majority of people who come to work because they want to do a great job. They want to have purpose. They want to have impact. If we can keep those things in mind, then typically we won't get in each of our own way by not being trustful of the team. So let me go to our last component here, which I just call intentional review. So just imagine you walk through all the other components we outlined here. The team is aligned behind purpose. You have your working agreements and all the things in place, and then you just stop. You don't do anything else. So what potentially could happen? Well, you can continue to grow, and the new people who come into the organization don't have that same experience. Complacency might set in. Typically, you may grow enough that you hire managers and they may see things differently. And because we haven't been talking about our working agreements, our purpose, we haven't been doing storytelling or updating our systems, then bad behavior or things that we wouldn't want within the organization can start to grow. And so then you'll have 50 people who aren't as clear on the purpose and you can go from having a really effective, high-performing culture to culture not working at all. Now, in order to do this, just remember, again, with our design principle, culture is iterative. So the first time you do this, some processes might not be working, or you might do it all well and then you leave it. We have to come back and see and check in. So we probably have heard things about unlimited vacation policy, right? So we have an unlimited vacation policy, but no one is using it. And we need to catch those sorts of things and seek to understand and then figure out why that's happening. You want to do that with all areas of your culture. So think about, like, how are people experiencing my organization or the organization that we're creating? There is for sure a difference between we have a process for that and people understanding that process, or to the first bullet here, how people experience that process. So in order to make sure that happens, we have to come back and do intentional reviews. Typically, what I recommend is something like a retrospective. 3 questions: what's working, where are we stuck, and what might we do differently? You can do that for your entire organization from a culture perspective, or even for a subset system. So hiring, what's working, where are we stuck, what might we do differently? It's really rapid and it gives you qualitative information, so stories that you can use and have further clarity. So when we talk about that intentional review, how can we understand the employee experience in action? What areas of our culture do we actually want to measure and look at? What cadence? And that retrospective could be great. I can add those 3 questions in the chat if that'll be helpful. And is there anywhere we need to do a gut check? So sometimes we'll think like we're not innovating as much, or things aren't going well. I get a sense that something is off and we maybe ignore it or not check in. We want to do an intentional check-in for those things. That can be something like a traditional survey, or it can be something more rapid like a retrospective. Sometimes it depends on the size of the team, but where you can hear stories and honest feedback is typically going to give you much more insight, right, or bang for your buck. All right. So these are the 5. So the activate and intentional review is just the 5th step. So you go through the other components, and then the last thing you want to do is make sure that you're doing check-ins here. So I want to transition us to Q&A, but I do want to share just one other slide, which is just some recommended resources. I know all of you all are probably so busy, but if you have capacity, or if you're like me, I can only do things by Audible right now. It's a few books and another resource I want to add. So The Good Job Strategy by Zenith Tom, and that is the second half of that title is How the Smartest Companies Invest in Employees to Lower Costs and Boost Profits. And she really focuses and goes deep there on the systems and operations that support employee experience rather than hindering employee experience, and also just building better systems. Another systems book is going to be Emergent Strategy. I will say this one is a little bit more abstract, but it will help and give some really creative ideas around building culture or how you work together in teams. If you're doing more management, right, like management of someone, leadership around specific team members, and your organization is currently in the phase where you're helping people stretch and grow and develop, or you have early career folks building an A team, is a really good book for that. And it talks about like this purpose impact piece, but gives some very specific actions and scenarios you can take. And then finally, the article that, I recommend for anyone to start with, high-performing teams need psychological safety. So none of the other work that we're doing, if people don't feel safe, is going to be as effective as you want it to be. So I wanted to list that one here as well. All right, so with that, I'm going to transition us over to Q&A. Let me just stop sharing here. All right, what questions do you have or ideas can we talk through more? All right, I guess we're gonna do them in the chat. We'll start with Layla, and then Kiara, I know you had your comment, and I think I wanna ask you a question back here. So let's start with Layla. Layla says, I'm curious to hear more example, even if high level, of systems that need to be in place. I feel like I heard maybe communication and org chart, hiring policy. What are other suggestions for systems? This is a great question. We typically, I consider put a lot of, almost everything as a system, but one that I'm working on with a company right now is performance structure management. So right now they're thinking about how do we want to look at performance, and they're building something completely new. That's a system. Onboarding would be a system. Decision-making or meeting cadence is another system. Now with everything that's happening, I'm seeing a lot of people, or I'm also encouraging as well, people to go from online Zoom meetings to think about what can be done in an asynchronous way, or what can be done as updates, and then creating a system for that. So these are the type of decisions that we have on camera meetings for. These are the type of decisions or feedback that we do asynchronously, or give updates asynchronously. So just mostly whatever you look at, you're gonna want to systemize it. Now let's say you're doing design process. I think design within its own has its own system, right? The step-by-step. So anything that you're, from a culture perspective, like we need more clarity on, people are getting stuck, or we need alignment in how we do it, typically you'll want to create a system for that. Yeah, no worries. All right, and Kiara, let's see, let me read the question again. I'm interested in how these aspects can and should be integrated into firms. Okay, that will only be run by the owner with no other employees. So Kiara, definitely starting to outline some of these things. So if we think about purpose, right, we want to capture that for the purpose for our business and company for ourselves, because I think that that can be extremely, like, when we're hitting a wall, or when we're thinking, why am I even doing this, right, that we have that purpose statement. Working agreements, the same thing. When I partner, one thing I was thinking about is like an independent contractor. When I partner with people, what are the things we can't, you know, when someone is not an employee, we can't control their actions, but you can share, this is the way that we interact with our customers, or this is the way, you know, that we give updates because they're, you know, responding to the work that you have for them. So you can use almost any of these completely independent on your own. And they are also going to be really helpful if you're partnering with other folks, like an independent contractor or just some thought partnerships as well. And what I'll say is I still encourage you to come back and look at those. And if you add a person, if you add people to your team, then you'll want to come back and go through this process again. Let me know if you have another question or a follow-up to that. Any other questions? Yeah, of course. All right. Well, it was so wonderful to share with you all today. You can contact me anytime if you wanted the slides, because I don't think I had set up for that. So there's my email address, Lakita@CoCreateWork. I also on the website have like 40 questions you can ask yourself, and a hiring guide if that will be helpful. So feel free to grab those, and I really appreciate everyone joining today. Yeah, no worries, Layla. Thank you for coming. Thank you, Diana.
So Lakita, if we have no more questions, I'd like to vamp a little while in case someone's a slow typer like me.
For sure.
But I wanted
Sounds
to thank
great.
you. Those are some great insights, and I really appreciate being able to think big picture and get out of what we're doing just at home right now, and to be able to build outward. So thank you for all of your insight.
Yeah, absolutely. It's my pleasure. And I think to the question that we were answering, if it's just me, like we can start working on it right now, and then that'll set us up for when we bring people on the team, and how we talk about our culture when we do our work as well.
Great.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you very much for joining us today. I hope you can come back next Friday at noon, and we will see you online until further notice. Thank you. Bye.
Thank you.